Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin at 4700 Grover Avenue. Our programs are every Sunday at noon, and they're free and open to the public. Today, it's my privilege to introduce Adrian Moore, Executive Director of Council on At-Risk Youth. He's going to be speaking on closing the pipeline to prison. With him is another one of his associates, Melissa Axton. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Melissa. She's a youth advisor with CARY for over 2 years. She has a master's in social work, and she also attended University of Texas in psychology. She's very passionate about her work with adolescents and the Latino community. Adrian Moore is the executive director and founder of the Council on At-Risk Youth, and he has more than 40 years of experience in direct service, research, and management positions with the New Mexico Youth Authority, the Texas Youth Commission, the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, the American Correction Association, and of course currently the Council on At-Risk Youth. What he's going to be talking about is very socially important. Delinquency prevention and crime prevention. CARY goes upstream to the public school disciplinary system and focuses on violence and drug abuse prevention and intervening early to stop abusive, aggressive, and assaultive behavior. And a number of research projects have validated that students involved in the kind of programs that they offer benefit greatly, and there is greatly reduced occurrence of this type of problematic behavior. So, without further ado, I am very thrilled to introduce both Adrian and Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. It's a real pleasure to be with you and others here today. A delight to come and share with you some information about CARY, Council on At-Risk Youth. Another introduction, let me ask Jim Bryce, our board chair emeritus, to stand. Jim was our first chair for a period of 5 years back in 1999 when we got started. Let me call your attention. I think most of you have a handout. If you don't have one, my wife Mary will be happy to bring you one. But the handout has a number of materials in it, a brochure about CARY. There are several different news articles about CARY, Council on At-Risk Youth. I'd call your attention to the one by John Young that I think is particularly informative. There is also an example of one of the exercises that we do with youth that Melissa will be reviewing during her part of the presentation. There's also a press release back in July pointing out the interaction that CARY had with the British House of Commons. We were pleased that the House of Commons Select Committee on Justice from United Kingdom came to Austin in July to speak with CARY. They were interested in learning about violence prevention, delinquency prevention, drug abuse prevention, any number of problems with youth in Great Britain. We were delighted. There are thousands of youth service organizations in Texas, tens of thousands throughout the country. They came to visit with CARY to learn what we're doing to determine what they might be able to do in Great Britain to prevent delinquency, youth violence, and drug abuse. What I shared with them initially, I'd like to share with you very quickly, and this is just touching on an old fable, an American fable, the upriver, downriver fable that many of you are probably familiar with in one of the American villages that spread to any number of villages many, many years ago. In this fable, people in the village downstream or downriver were pulling out floundering individuals, people who were drowning in the river on a daily basis. And as time went on, they became more effective. They got high tech. They had longer snares. They were very, very effective in pulling out of the river these floundering, drowning individuals. And suddenly a youngster stood up and said, well, why don't we go upriver? and that had not occurred to anyone before. The kids that CARY works with are those kids who are floundering and drowning coming down the river. They're kids who are going into the Texas juvenile and criminal justice system. And I'll say more later, but in my view, the Texas juvenile and criminal justice system is much like the village or the villages in that American fable. We've been doing the same thing for years and years and years. We have yet to go upstream to determine where we might be able to intervene. CARY is a private nonprofit, a 501c3 organization. We have a 20-member board and many individuals. There's a listing of our board members in your packet. I hope you'll review that. But we have folks like Art Acevedo, Greg Hamilton, County Sheriff, Karen Sage, felony criminal court judge, Gary Cobb, a prosecutor in Travis County, many criminal justice folks, and we're also expanding to include other corporate big business organizations in Austin. CARY focuses on kids who are in the school disciplinary system, kids who are high risk, kids who are abusive, aggressive, assaultive, kids who we know from the research, these are the very kids who going down that river, these are the kids who go into juvenile and criminal justice. Extensive research, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. We're a government contractor. We get our budget principally from the city of Austin and from Travis County. We also do various fundraisers and benefits and contributions. We have a budget of less than $600,000 that employs 11 full and part-time individuals in the city of Austin, and we work with 600 kids. We make a considerable impact. Let me mention that the need is very, very strong for prevention and early intervention for these kids who will get engaged in violence at some point in time. A Chicago study released here just recently, looking at kids who kill, looking at the data and looking at their motivation for doing so, found that more than 80% of those kids were involved in those homicides with no premeditation. They were involved in a homicide due to anger, due to spur-of-the-moment conduct, due to impulsiveness, due to influence by other kids. So we know there is a way to get engaged early with these kids who have that impulsive behavior, who get angry, who hurt others because of that anger, and so on. We know considerable research has been done just in the past 5 years or so validating that kids in the school disciplinary system are kids who are in that gateway to juvenile and criminal justice. James Fox, who was our speaker here several years ago, found in a nationwide study that 60% of the kids who are bullies in middle school are going to go on, and 60% are going to have at least one criminal court adjudication by age 24. He found that 40% of those kids are going to have 3 criminal court convictions by age 24. Bullies, kids who have bully-like behavior without intervention, they go on to serious criminal activity. A Texas A&M study done for the governor's criminal justice division here about 5 years ago, looking at predictors for juvenile crime, found that the most powerful predictor is one serious school incident report. Very, very powerful, that those are the kids who go on to offend. Texas Appleseed released a report several years ago called the Texas School Pipeline to Prison Project. They found in interviewing inmate records throughout the state that the majority of people in criminal justice had first gone through that school disciplinary system. We missed an opportunity to intervene and to change that behavior. The Council of State Governments released a study a year ago this July called Breaking Schools Rules. And I encourage you to look at that. It's really a very, very good study. But they compared the results of almost 1 million kids over a 6-year period in Texas schools, they found that kids who go into the Texas school disciplinary system are highly likely to go on into juvenile and criminal justice. And the more frequently kids are involved with a disciplinary report, the higher the probability that they're going to commit criminal behavior and go into the juvenile and criminal justice system. So that presents really, in my view, in our view, an opportunity for us to get involved, to get engaged, to intervene, to change that behavior. CARY focuses on middle school kids, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, only those who have serious incidents including aggression, assault, abuse, intimidation of others, verbal threats to teachers and to other children. And you'd be surprised at the number of teachers who report having verbal threats from 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. CARY looks to work with non-adjudicated kids. Principally, we want to intervene before they're arrested, before they're prosecuted, before they're adjudicated as a delinquent child. 95% of our kids are minorities. 95% live in poverty. 95% are eligible for free and reduced lunches and breakfast. Poverty is a big, big issue. 75% come from single-parent families. Not that a single-parent family is problematic, but poverty for single mothers who have 2 or 3 other younger siblings who struggle every month to pay rent, to buy groceries, to pay utilities, poverty impacts a kid's life. 50% of our kids come from parents where one or more has been convicted and is in county jail, state prison, on probation or parole. So these kids come from families where criminal justice is very, very common. We have what I call the 20% rule. Of the 600 kids that we serve, about 20% are ESL, English as a second language student. About 20% are special ed students. About 20% are CPS, Children's Protective Services. They've been referred or they're under the jurisdiction of the state. Another 20% have been arrested. They've been to Gardner-Betts, and they're well on their way. I mentioned earlier we don't try to work with adjudicated or arrested kids, but we don't deny those kids who have that background experience. High-risk kids who are in the gateway to prison. CARY is all about closing that pipeline to prison with these 600 kids. We have a very strong administrative agreement with the Austin Independent School District. Referrals come from not from CARY staff, but from principals, from assistant principals and counselors. The school provides a classroom space, group space. We have very, very strong support from principals, from assistant principals, from counselors. Staff are in 9 school campuses, 8 middle schools, and the Alternative Learning Center. Excellent collaboration with the Austin Independent School District. Staff members that CARY has assigned to the schools, like Melissa, have master's degrees in social work and counseling and psychology, generally have 3 to 5 years experience in special ed, in mental health, in correction. The folks are really very highly dedicated. They don't make a whole lot of money, and benefits are fairly good, but they are there because they're really invested in these kids, and you'll hear that when you hear Melissa speak. Staff are very competent, very, very effective at social cognitive skills training. A word about the program, aggression replacement training, and then Melissa's going to come in and share with you some of the individual study elements that we're involved in. ART has been around for 25 years throughout the U.S. It's in Canada and several European countries. It is evidence-based meaning that it has been researched. The research has been researched and validated as being an effective program for changing behavior. U.S. Department of Education endorses the program. The Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention endorses it. SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, as an endorser. The Center for Study and Prevention of Violence in Colorado endorses the program. So it's a good one. We like it. We get really very, very good results, a good return on investment that I'll chat with you about in just a moment. But let me turn to Melissa, who will visit with us about the Peace Rocks program, aggression replacement training.
So I'll be telling you a little bit about how we implement the aggression replacement training program. So for 14 weeks, we pull students from their electives twice a week and go over a new lesson each time. These groups are very structured. They're psychoeducational, meaning that we focus on educating them on skills that include affective, cognitive, and behavioral skills that will help them better manage situations that tend to provoke anger in them. We also do service learning projects with them at least once per semester, which means that we give them the opportunity to pick and lead groups on how to serve the community. And then we also do parent empowerment groups 1 to 2 times a month. The parents of CARY students come to the school after hours, and this is their opportunity to learn the skills that their children are also learning so that they can reinforce them whenever they're at home as well. During the second semester, the students then transition to individual counseling or skills training sessions. So we meet with those students that were in the groups the previous semester twice a month. That's the opportunity for us to either do actual counseling with them or just to follow up and help them kind of reinforce any skills that they had learned the previous semester. During the summer, we focus on making home visits, and those home visits are done usually to just help the parents and the students reflect on how that year went, also do some goal setting for the summer and upcoming school year. The field trips is one of my favorite parts. We take the kids to places that will be beneficial to them, basically exposing them to environments that they're not used to being around and showing them that, you know, there's more out there than the little bubble of the neighborhood they're used to being in. To tell you a little bit more about the curriculum that we implement, the social skills is the behavioral component of it, where we teach them how to replace antisocial behaviors with positive alternatives. The anger management portion is the affective component that helps the students rethink anger-provoking situations and respond in a non-aggressive manner. The moral development is the cognitive component of it, where we help raise the students' level of justice and concerns for the needs of others. The character education piece goes along with the moral development component. We teach them 15 character traits to include learning about what it means to be honest, to have integrity, to provide service to others, and we also do a respect agreement with them and really hold them to that high standard of respecting each other and others in their environment. The anger management, we teach them the MELT, which is a relaxation technique that also includes some strategies for balancing their brain. This is meant to help them be able to better focus on what we're teaching them and use that skill in classroom situations. The handout that you were given is an example of a worksheet that we use in the anger management cycle. So there's the reactive cycle and the proactive cycle. We help them reflect back on situations where they might have reacted in a way that was aggressive and really in-depth look at what can be done differently in the future and be more proactive about it, identifying triggers and stopping it before it gets to the point where they're reacting emotionally. The other component is the empathy. The HERES model is basically just steps that we use to teach them active listening skills. And the social skills, accepting no for an answer, sometimes can be an issue for some of these kids, and it's very important for them to succeed in school. So here is a picture of me with some of my beloved students on a field trip. This was at Cirque du Soleil. We were very fortunate to receive some donated tickets, and the kids were just amazed at what they saw. To give you an example of one specific student that I worked with, his name was Ricardo. He was really struggling with respecting his the teachers and other students in his classroom, constantly being sent out, and multiple times was suspended and sent to the alternative learning school. After about 5 months into the program, there was a huge difference in his behavior. He was a lot more respectful. He was definitely taking the time to think through his actions. Most notably, his attendance was pretty much like perfect after that. His grades improved. He was nominated as Student of the Month twice by school administrators in one semester. He also stopped hanging out with gang members, and that can be really important. As most of you may know, in adolescence, peers are a huge influence in what you're going to do. He stopped hanging out with those peers and joined the football team, his school football team, and is now doing what he needs to do to stay on track. And I will now hand it back over to Adrian.
Thank you, Melissa. And you can see that staff really have a very, very powerful influence on these very difficult, high-risk kids who we work with. And I think the follow-up, we haven't been able to do long-term, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year follow-up, but I think each of you are successful in your respective fields, and I think you can remember back when you were 12, 13, 14 years of age, you had a mentor, you had one or more adults who were helpful to you in influencing decision-making. My very, very strong belief is that so many of these kids don't have strong mentors at home, within their families, in the neighborhood, and staff, in that year-long involvement that they have, they become mentors, advisors, counselors, so that kids, I think, will remember years ahead the influence that staff had on them. What are the results of the CARY Peace Rocks, the Youth Violence Prevention Program? What are the outcomes? We've had over the years, we've been in business since 1999, 14-year anniversary celebration, September 1, but we've had in 5 different PhD-level research scientist groups to take a look at the data, 7 evaluation reports, and they've all been very positive. Our last one that was completed the 1st of May of this year took a CARY group of kids and kind of consistent with the research design, scientific research design, we were able for the first time through AISD to get a control group or a comparison group with kids with like characteristics, like demographics. What we found was that school attendance rates and grades went up for the CARY kids. School attendance and grades went down for the comparison group of kids. We looked at disciplinary referrals, disciplinary actions for in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension, for disciplinary alternative education program placement, and for juvenile justice alternative education placements. All 5 of those figures went down for CARY kids. CARY kids did better. Fewer disciplinary actions. For the comparison group of kids, each of those 5 indicators went up. We looked at drug abuse referrals. CARY kids had decreased levels of drug abuse offenses, where comparison group kids, those increased significantly. So we know the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, in that based on hard scientific evidence, the CARY program makes a difference, a significant difference. It gets strong results. You've listened to Melissa's comments and to mine on the impact that we're making with these kids, very, very difficult kids. What about financial considerations? CARY's cost, and I mentioned earlier we have city support and Travis County support, thanks to all of those folks, but our cost is less than $1,000 per student per year for a full year, 2 full semesters of pretty intensive service, less than $1,000 a month. The same kid, and we're only serving 600 out of 6,000 of these kids who have these incident reports for aggression, abuse, assault, intimidation, verbal threats to others. We're serving 10%. The other kids in that comparison group, the control group, when they go over to Gardner Betts, to juvenile probation, to the Gene Muir facility for a year of service, the average you and I as taxpayers are spending is $20,000 a year. If they go to Travis County Jail on a year-long misdemeanor sentence with Greg Hamilton, you and I are paying almost $40,000 a year. That's a 40-to-1 return on investment or 20-to-1 return on investment. Or we can go further. If the kid commits aggravated robbery, he goes to state prison for 5 years at $20,000 a year. You and I are spending $100,000 on that young person. If he goes to the Texas Youth Commission, where I work, we spend $120,000 a year. The majority of all those people, in my view, because I've been in juvenile and criminal justice all of my professional career, the majority of all of those folks, had they been introduced to a program like CARY's, they could have been turned around and costs would have been reduced significantly. There's a more efficient way. We spend, according to a Red McCombs UT School of Business board intern we had 2 years ago, I asked the intern, tell me, how much do we spend, if I live in Austin and Travis County, what do we spend on juvenile and criminal justice? And remember, look at city budgets, county budgets, state budgets, federal budgets for law enforcement, courts, prosecution, public defense, jails, probation, prisons, parole, and it's a bifurcated system for juveniles and adults. What do we spend? His figure, his term came to a close before he finished, but he was up almost to $1 billion a year that you and I are spending in Travis County and in Austin, Texas, on juvenile and criminal justice. We spend right at $1 billion a year for the Austin ISD school district. Is there anything wrong with that picture? Is there anything wrong with that balance? Is there anything wrong with the notion that, and we have an excellent criminal justice system, an excellent system in Austin and in Travis County. There are only 3-4 things wrong with it. Number one, criminal justice doesn't heal the victim of the crime. If you've been victimized, if a member of your family has been victimized, if you know someone who's been a victim of a crime, you know that that pain, the agony, the hurt, the despair lasts for years and years and years. Criminal justice, juvenile justice doesn't heal the victim. Criminal justice also doesn't cure the offender. I was at a meeting at the Legislative Budget Board, statistical analysis of criminal justice Friday, day before yesterday. Learned with new data that recidivism rates for juvenile probation, adult probation is running 50, 60, 70%. For folks who are incarcerated in county jail, state prison, recidivism rates are running 60, 70, 75%. For your business, if you only succeeded in 25% of your business product or service, how long would you be in business? We have to question how effective criminal justice is. We have to ask, should we not get engaged earlier? Should we not do prevention and early intervention with these 6,000 kids? Not just 600, but 6,000. Should we not shift a big portion of that $1 billion that you and I spend here locally in Austin and Travis County? Shouldn't we put that, some of that, into the school system, into our school disciplinary system with these high-risk kids, turn them around, keep them out? So we now, I think, with the new data, with the research, knowing that evidence-based programs such as aggression replacement training that Melissa presented, we know that works. We know who the high-risk kids are. I cited the research, the studies that have documented that school disciplinary kids are the kids who are feeders into our criminal justice system. With those pieces of knowledge, should we not go upriver? Shouldn't we go upstream? Shouldn't we get engaged much earlier? I will ask you in closing, and then I'll go back to Bonnie for a Q&A, but I will ask you, encourage you, go to the CARY website. It's www.CARY4kids.org, and I think that is in some of the information. If you'd like to get actively involved as an advocate, if you would like to call on county commissioners, on city council members, on state representatives, I encourage you to sign up, let us know, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll get in touch with you generally on a monthly basis and let you know when this budget time occurs so that you can advocate, you can be a part of a good advocacy mechanism to change public policy, to get involved earlier with these deeply troubled and troublesome kids. You can help to make a difference. So, with that, Bonnie, I will turn back to you. Sure.
Do you make any efforts to do family therapy with these children, since the parents are in some position of to influence children, and how successful is that?
Sure.
Or is there even any funding for that?
And I'm going to ask Melissa initially to respond, and then I will comment.
The way that we involve the family is through the parent empowerment groups that we do bi-monthly, and those are more of like a skills training sort of group, but sometimes they can turn into group therapy sessions where we try to get the parents to connect with each other, kind of support each other, build that support system, as well as hear the students' perspective on the issues, and basically just build those connections and learn from each other.
And I'll comment, Bonnie, as well. I think working with parents is a real challenge for us. I mentioned earlier in review of the characteristics of students and of families, poverty is a big, big issue where people are really, really kind of consumed with being able to make it day by day, to be able to generate funding to pay rent, to buy groceries, to pay utilities. I visited with a mother at Pierce Middle School some time back who had two youngsters, one on each hip. She had gotten to Pierce Middle School on a bus. It was her second time there. When I drove up to the school, there were two kids who were plastic handcuffed in the back of a police car. Getting out, it turned out these were two kids who CARY was working with. They had been suspended earlier in the day. They left the school grounds. They went 2 blocks away. They were smoking marijuana. They were reported, they were picked up, they were brought back. The mother shared with me while I was sitting in the principal's office that she was just struggling, that she had been there twice that day. The two students, one was her son, one was her nephew. Her sister was in residential rehab, drug rehab for months and months and months. Her husband was locked up in county jail. She had no other means of support. Tough time, hard times, so that when we do interact with parents, we encourage them to get in touch with other organizations to try to gain employment, to gain other means of support. But parents are a real challenge.
Yes, my name is Fred Higgins, and some years ago I spent 3 or 4 years on a board of what was called the Travis County Children's Partnership. They had received a federal grant. The goal was, I think, it really meshes with what you're doing, but part of the problem was that all the funding, or much of the funding available to help children with these types of problems, was in silos. They had to be committed to the TYC or to a bed in a psychiatric hospital. The money couldn't follow the children. And the idea was to try to create a system of care where the kids could stay in the community with wraparound groups and things. Have you ever worked with that group? And I mean, it sounds like your goals are very similar.
Yeah, we were involved early on, and we collaborate with the. I think that group has evolved into the mental health planning partnership. Now we're an active member of that. We're an active member of Ready by 21. We work with One Voice, a group of nonprofits engaged in human service. So we collaborate really quite extensively. But your point, you're exactly right. That too much of our money is locked up in silos, and really tough to change public policy. I have worked with the Texas legislature the last 4 legislative sessions, trying to get a bill enacted to fund prevention, early intervention with these at-risk kids in the school disciplinary system. The first 2 years, we worked with Jerry Madden, Representative Madden from Plano. He got a bill through the House with 100% of the vote. We got to the Senate, didn't go anywhere in the Senate. Lost headway because there was a mandate in a subsequent session that no bill with a fiscal note would get introduced whatsoever. Finally, session before last, we did get a provision into Senate Bill 653 that established the Texas Juvenile Justice Department and joining Texas Youth Commission and Texas Juvenile Probation Commission. There's a provision in that bill that enables that organization to fund prevention and early intervention. Fortunately. Unfortunately, when it went through the legislative process through the Joint Conference Committee with funding, they defunded the $30 million request. So there's still no funding available. But we need to shift our federal, our state, our local public policy emphasis where we're getting that money out of those silos that are ineffective. As I was saying, Legislative Budget Board reports 50, 60, 70, 75% of kids and adults on probation, parole, locked up, fail. The majority fail. We need to change. We need to get involved much earlier. We need to break loose that funding. We need to convince policymakers there's a better way. There's a more cost-efficient way. There's a more programmatically effective way to turn kids around, to get them redirected in a positive way.
I also may add really quickly, on more of a micro level, the way that we handle those situations is if one of our students is detained while they're on our caseload, we will do what we can to go visit them while they're at Gardner Betts and still talk about any situations that may be frustrating them. We also do refer to the Center for, is it CPC, the Children's Community Partnership for Children, for those wraparound services and attend those meetings whenever possible. So we do whatever we can to make sure that they're getting the support they need.
Hi, a couple of questions. I noticed that you're not in all the middle schools in AISD, and I wondered if you might comment on that. I noticed that you're also not in Del Valley and other places that I'm sure could use the services and other school districts. And then the other question, which is different than that, is at what part of your, I know you have a few fundraisers around town, what part of your funding comes from non-governmental sources, and what are those funding sources?
Sure. The schools where we are, we're at the Alternative Learning Center. We've been there since we started 14 years ago. But we're south at Bedichek, back almost next door at Burnett Middle Schools. We're at Dobie and Garcia Middle Schools, Pierce and Webb. And then back down south, we're at Martin and Mendez Middle Schools. So we're 8 middle schools and a Behavioral Alternative Learning Center. We are not at Del Valley. I tried to get some federal funding years ago that looked good, but it didn't happen. We have a pending proposal right now to be able to go to Del Valley Middle School. We would be statewide if I had it my way. When I started CARY 14 years ago, after being involved in government for many, many years, juvenile justice, I thought it would be much easier to get money. I thought that the evidence is so clear, it's very obvious that we need to do prevention. I thought it would be a snap to be able to get funding. It's not been that easy. It's not been easy at all. A horrendous challenge to influence and to get public officials to listen up, to look at the evidence, look at the research, look at the results. You know, where are we going to get our biggest bang for the buck? So really a tough challenge in getting funding, and it all has to do with funding. And the second part of your question was? Funding outside of government. Yeah, our budget this year is right at $560,000. We get $200,000 from the city, $200,000 from Travis County. We're in the 9th year of government support there. The other $150,000, $160,000 comes from contributions, donations, fundraisers. We had a benefit several weeks ago at Esther's Follies, Comedy for CARY. We'll have a musical event in January where musicians donate their time as a fundraiser. In May, we'll have our 8th public education benefit where we bring in outside expert speakers. We have had people like James Garbarino from Cornell University, author of Lost Boys. We've had Barbara Colarosa, bully prevention. She wrote The Bully, The Bullied, and The Bystander. We've had Jamie Foxx, author of Kids Who Kill. We're looking this spring to have the lady, if you've seen the video, the television part on a piece entitled Orange is the New Black. Because of my background, I generally avoid all shows about prisons. I don't really care for them. This one is quite good, based on a book by a lady who spent 18 months in federal prison. So I think this spring we'll talk about prisons. She says that prisons don't work. They're a waste of time. They're a waste of money. So we have people like that who come in and who speak. Part of our funding comes there. We've also had foundation support, Hogg Foundation here locally, RGK Foundation, the Meadows Foundation in Dallas, Glimmer of Hope Foundation, Troll Foundation, and others. But funding is a big issue. My belief is that prevention, early intervention should be a government responsibility. You know, it's so difficult, it's so competitive with so many nonprofits, it's tough to raise funds in that area. But I think as a taxpayer myself, I'd rather see my money go into prevention, early intervention. We spend $200 million a year locking up 12,500 inmates at the Texas Department of Correction and state prison. $200 million a year we spend. You know, this lady says prisons don't work. They're a waste of time. They're a waste of money. 60, 70, 75% recidivism rate. Prisons are dinosaurs. We need to change that. We need to do something that's more efficient early on.
Thank you for coming today and talking to us about the important work of Council at Risk Youth. You talked quite a bit earlier about the upstream-downstream concept, and you mentioned that many of your at-risk youth had anger problems, and that was usually the source of what started many of their issues. Have you used your work and your database to analyze the sources of these anger problems, and is it possible to even push it farther upstream to address the sources of the anger before you get to the point where you have to deal with it?
Sure.
It's not something that we necessarily document per student, but because of the background of most of our youth advisors is in counseling and social work, I think it's just part of the work that we do is to address those deeper roots of the issue. And just from my work with the students, I know that, you know, a lot of it has to do with just poverty, you know, or being bullied, or, you know, being in an abusive home where they feel disempowered and they come to school wanting to take it out on somebody else. It's so many different things that I believe are all intertwined, and it's such a complex issue. Our solution is more of a specific sort of intervention. And we have noticed, or at least I've noticed in some of the students that I work with, once we kind of deal with that, then they're better able to handle the other roots of the issue.
And I think another point, so many of our kids, that poverty issue and the single-parent family without involvement by the male figure, the father, or others, kids don't get nice jeans and nice tennies like other kids do if you live in poverty. Now, that makes you angry, upset, you're frustrated. Frustration occurs with anger. Jamie Foxx, I mentioned earlier in his book, Kids Who Kill, he says kids who kill, they kill out of anger, out of frustration. And he talks at length about the frustration that so many of these young people experience in life. We need to address that. George Vito, and some of you are old enough, I think, to recall Dr. George Vito, who's head of the prison system, 30, 40 years ago. And Dr. Vito went to the Texas legislature and he said, prisons are occupied by people who are poor, inept, and stupid. And he wasn't being disrespectful by saying stupid. But he's right. People who are locked up, people who are in criminal justice, juvenile justice, are poor. 600 kids we work with are poor. 6,000 kids who we should be working with are poor. Inept, Dr. Vito was saying, they don't have social skills. Adults who go to prison, They don't know how to fill out a job application. They don't know how to go for a job interview. They don't know how to conduct themselves at a job interview. Stupid. And again, he wasn't being disrespectful, but kids who will argue with Melissa and me and others and say, I don't need a high school degree. I can get along just fine on my own. Stupid because they make irrational kinds of decisions. They don't think through consequences. They don't do good planning for themselves. So, we need to start very, very early, Mr. Bauer. We need to start in elementary school. The Brits that I mentioned, the United Kingdom House of Commons group that we spoke with in July, suggested that wouldn't it be a good idea to do the character education component at least with kids who are in elementary school? Absolutely. It would be very, very advisable, very helpful. It would be one of the best returns on investment that we could make. Let me mention before we close, I also have a 14-minute video that was supported and funded by Rotary Club of Austin. If some of you are interested in more information, you're welcome to one of these.
It's been about 14 years since I worked with children as a mental health therapist, so I really respect what you're doing. Right now I work with soldiers at Fort Hood who have anger problems, most of which are in their 20s, early 30s. I really admire your evidence-based program here. It looks like it's based on both cognitive behavior therapy and empathy training, which are both really important. I guess I had, when you showed the slide of 20% of your children have been victims of abuse or neglect, to me that's probably way underreported. What you said verbally was there's CPS involved, which is with the tip of the iceberg of kids who are abused or neglected. I think right now, with the funding of Head Start being suspended, along with the rest of us federal employees, their kids are hurting from that. My understanding that food stamps programs are, hardly meeting the needs of, poor people. I could go on probably, but two specific questions I had. The slides you showed were all boys. Are you serving girls as well? And I'm familiar with most of your material except for melt. I have a question. What is that?
Let me comment on the girls question, and then I'll turn to Melissa. The division between boys and girls, we serve about 80% boys, 20% girls. We do that because kids who go into juvenile justice, criminal justice, it's about an 80-20 split between the two. So in our government contract, we want to stay consistent with the objective of doing prevention, consistent with that ratio of boys to girls. We've applied for a Futuro Fund grant, a Hispanic group, small grant, $20,000, but we are focusing that grant on working with more girls, particularly Hispanic girls. About 2/3 of our kids are Hispanic. But the need is great for girls, without a doubt. And the girls' behavior is quite a bit different from the boys. They're not so physically violent, but they can be mentally cruel to other girls in particular. So the need is there. But Melissa, you may have a comment.
As far as the MELT technique it's an acronym, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly what each letter stands for, but it's basically a deep breathing technique. We have the students cross their legs and do a little crossing their arms, which is to help balance the brains. And then while they're in that position, then we are teaching them to do the deep breathing. Many of the kids will say, oh, I've tried deep breathing, it doesn't work. Okay, well, let's practice an actual long, deep breath. And over a period, we start them at 30 seconds, and then over time, build them to be able to do it for 2 minutes. We usually have some really, really relaxing music playing. I might dim the lights a little bit and just really get them into that state so that they know that this is something that works for me, and when I'm in class and this kid next to me keeps pushing me or poking me, I can just do this MELT.
Well, I've observed the Texas legislature and the public funding sources, and your problem is that your clients are not making enough political contributions because that's just the way our state works. There's no commitment to help children, unwed mothers. I'm amazed that you have that you're as successful as you are. I've become very discouraged listening to the legislature, but I think you're to be commended, and I think your nonprofit and individual funding sources is what you should put your emphasis on, because the legislature could care less about the children of the state, in my opinion.
I have been accused of being an eternal optimist from time to time, and I think that we must continue to try to educate, to inform, to shape some of the decisions with the state legislature. I testify at every opportunity, work with special committees, try to share information, research. We've got to make a change. We simply have to make a change. Our prison system is a dinosaur. Once again, we're not achieving anything meaningful. Considerable research even shows that incarceration doesn't necessarily impact public safety. But we need to shape attitudes of policymakers for sure. And once again, I would encourage you to go on the CARY website and to register as an advocate. And when the time comes, when we are working with committees, whether it be city, county, or state, I'd like to be able to call on you and say, come with me.
A proportion of your clients, I'm sure, have some more serious mental disorders. And I know there are several of us here who've been working for the last decade at least on trying to improve access to mental health services, including psychiatric and psychological and social work services, more intensive services. When you interface with the official mental health system, is there any improvement at all in the last decade with the with Central Health, our healthcare district now established, or is it about the same as it's always been?
Well, when it comes to the mental health aspect of it, we're not allowed to ask the students if they have any sort of mental illness, but it does come up a lot, and if we do become aware of it, then that's obviously something that we collaborate with the school staff with, the school counselors, and if we feel they need further evaluation, then we help in that process of referral as well. What I do know is that Lone Star Circle of Care, I believe, is working on setting up clinics in certain schools now that are going to be focusing on those mental health needs of the students. I think it's very much in the pilot sort of phase of the program, but it's something that, I don't know, in the past 7 years since I've been working with mental health in the mental health field, they've definitely been more receptive to using that as a primary intervention and not just, discipline.
Another comment, we try to work very, very closely with communities and schools, another excellent nonprofit here in Austin. They're statewide, and a lot of their service focuses on mental health, so that when we get kids who do have that mental health issue, we very quickly get them engaged with communities and schools. In fact, at the majority of our school sites, we have partnerships with communities and schools in that we share an office with them. So we work very, very closely with that group. I think another point nationally, after Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook school shootings, 20 kids shot and killed, and several school teachers, adults in Connecticut, December 14th, I believe it was, this last year. And with each school shooting that we have a national outrage that all too often is very, very short-lived. But I know from the White House there was encouragement and support to have more mental health services. We need to have the capability in our schools to do early mental health screening to identify these kids. I would say, and I wrote to President Obama in December of this last year encouraging, not only do we need mental health services, but we need to focus federally through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, we need to focus more of those services and more of those resources to kids who are in trouble in the school disciplinary system, kids who are abusive, aggressive, assaultive, who've been identified, they have documented incidents. We know from the research these are kids who graduate into criminal justice. We need to have more of our federal efforts focused there. In 1974, I was really very, very encouraged when Congress passed the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. And even then, I had been in the system long enough to recognize we needed more prevention, and I thought, aha, this will be helpful. But over the years, the majority of all that funding has gone into juvenile detention, juvenile probation, juvenile parole, juvenile court. It's gone into services and programs and support for kids who are already arrested, detained, adjudicated. We need to shift our federal efforts to support mental health services for kids, as well as services much like CARY's program for kids who are in our school disciplinary system. And I think a final point, I know we're getting close to closing here, but a final point, CARY is really, really interested, and I've taken advantage of every opportunity to communicate with federal officials. I met with Jim and my former employer, the president of National Council on Crime and Delinquency, several months ago here in Austin, and shared with him that CARY would have interest in moving nationally, that we would like to see our model adopted statewide, but throughout the country. As I Google prevention and delinquency prevention, school violence prevention, I don't find many other programs similar to CARY's anywhere around the country. And we're spending $1 billion locally here on juvenile and criminal justice. Expand that out statewide, probably $25 billion you and I spend every year on city, county, state, federal taxes to support juvenile and criminal justice. We need to expand the infrastructure for prevention and early intervention. We need to shift some of that funding away from our criminal justice system into prevention, early intervention with these at-risk kids who we know are going to graduate into that very, very costly system.
Thank you for talking about a very worthwhile, innovative program that I think deserves a lot more support, and it is a model. Thank you for taking time to come and talk with us.
Thank you. Enjoyed being here with you.